Hello and welcome to this University of Portsmouth Business Talk in the COVID-19 times. Today's topic, making sure online is what saves, not burns my business. I'm delighted to be joined by two very eminent people. Mo Awdoud, who is the Managing Director of MA Consulting Limited. Mo, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks, Peter. My name is Mo Awdoud. I'm a cybersecurity consultant and I've been in the industry for around 20 years. I run a practice out of Havant and I help small, medium organizations go through their cybersecurity journey and maturity.
Thank you, Mo. That's really useful. And also from the university, joining us on the call is Dr. Vasilios Karagianopoulos. Vasilios, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you for introducing me, and thank you to everyone who's attending. I was saying my name is Vasilis Karagianopoulos, and I'm a reader in cybercrime and cybersecurity at the Institute of Criminal Justice Studies at the University of Portsmouth. And I'm also the director of the Cybercrime Awareness Clinic, which is an innovation project that helps the community, the local community, and different vulnerable groups in the community deal with cybercrime issues. And we're working with the National Cybersecurity Center and other law enforcement organizations in terms of supporting small and medium enterprises in dealing with information security.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Vasilios. Obviously, we are in a period of time where online has become much bigger than it ever once before. Whether you're Amazon or an SME, I think it's probably moved into your area, and whether it's actually making sales online, delivering products online, or actually just operating your team online, it's something that we're now all massively involved in, which is why we've chosen to do this webinar. So I'm going to go through the questions, and I think to set the scene, before we get going on the questions that have come in from the SMEs, I want to come to you first, Vasilios, and just ask, what is cybercrime and why should we, the general public or even businesses, be concerned about it?
Well, this is a great question to set the scene. It's not an easy question to answer, and coming from academia, a lot of ink has been spilled in terms of trying to define what cybercrime actually is. The short and easy answer is it is any kind of crime that involves a computer or an information network. But it's obviously a little bit more complicated than that. So we have, for example, some categorizations in terms of cyber-dependent and cyber-enabled cybercrime, and I'll explain what that means. So cyber-dependent are crimes that didn't exist before the internet or before computers, and have come up because of the use and the birth and the use of computers. So, for example, hacking is considered to be one cyber-dependent crime, or a denial of service attack that people might have heard before, where you get a lot of different computers to send a large amount of information towards a server or another computer, and then that computer cannot cope, that server cannot cope with the traffic, and it collapses. The other category is the cyber-enabled, and from that term, you can imagine we're talking about crimes that pre-existed, but have been changed or are facilitated by the use of digital technologies. So let's say cyber fraud. We had fraud before, and we will have after computers as well. So using a computer to commit fraud, so phishing emails, for example, did exist before the internet, but obviously the internet has made it much easier to reach people on a wider scale, and like steal money from them or information or whatever you want to steal from them. So this is perhaps a short version of what cybercrime actually is.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vasilios. And that's quite nice, actually, because it puts it in the context of business-related crime all the way through to like personal crime, where you're talking about fraud and phishing emails and such. Just coming to you on that same question, Mo, from a business perspective, why should people be concerned about cybercrime?
Yeah, well, I think it's really the proliferation now that we've seen historically. The types of attacks were targeting large organizations and were very sophisticated. And that capability, that technical capability that you needed, resided within small specialist groups. And what we've seen is as those techniques become exposed and the tools become publicly available, the barrier to entry is becoming lower and lower. And so subsequently what we see is that the proliferation of those attacks now are spread across all the way through to small enterprises, whereas historically that wasn't the case.
Okay, and so sticking with that theme and also sticking with you, Mo, from a business perspective, what are the key areas? What are the key things you should be either thinking about or looking for from a cybercrime perspective? And I appreciate that's a broad question because it's sort of what kind of business are we talking about? But if you were giving business advice, generic business advice, and people were saying, well, do I need to be interested in cybercrime? What are the areas you would suggest they should be looking at?
Yeah, it remains, in my mind, the same thing as it has been for a long time, which is the business to understand the data that it holds and the risks to those data. And that's where it all starts from. People jump to technical conclusions of, I need to protect my company from security. I need to protect myself from cybercrime. I need to put these controls in place. I need to do all this. The first thing to do is establish what is it that you really care about and what is it that's really going to affect your business. So, we say it as simple as once you understand the data that you hold, where that data sits, and you understand the impact to your business of not having access to that data, then that drives the remediation activity on the controls that you need to have. So if you don't know that, you can't build on top of what are the next things to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Vasilios, from your perspective, would you agree with that, or is there other things that you think businesses should be thinking about?
I totally agree with Mo. This is the first step we take when we are advising SMEs in our line of work and through the clinic. The first thing we do is give them a questionnaire, and the first questions we're asking are exactly the questions that Mo has highlighted. What are your information assets? And what do you think are the risks? Who might want to take that information, and what could they do with that information? Obviously, we help them think about different scenarios. I think another important aspect in relation to what Mo highlighted is how dynamic this situation is, and how through our operation, especially now with COVID and transitioning to a much more intensified online activity from a business perspective, we might be generating and we might be holding information that we weren't really bothering with beforehand, or we might be exposing information we had to additional or different risks as well. And I think this is certainly very, very important to consider, because it's not a static situation where you have some information and it just stays there and you have to consider how you protect it. Things change, information changes, you get more, you get less, you have to delete some information based on the GDPR as well if it's not needed anymore. So it's not about just what you have, but what you're creating, and what you have to let go as well.
Yeah, and I think that's quite topical, isn't it? Because in the last 24 hours, Twitter, through their staff accounts, I don't know the exact details, have been hacked, and that has subsequently led to a breach in their data. And that sort of segue brings me nicely onto the first question that's come in from businesses that have sent them in, which is somebody saying they don't really understand the different security offers that pop up when they log onto their computer. And I suppose they're talking about all these things that say your virus software is out of date, or do you have this checker? Can we perform a scan? How do they know what they really need? And I suppose if I put this in the context of perhaps a business working from home with a basic computer and anything else, what should they be looking at? What do they need? And I think to start with, come to Mo as a practical person.
Yeah, so in the context of home working, and I think there's a couple of variables here depending on what the configuration is and how they connect back to the office. So, the traditional things that we would recommend and expect is antivirus as a starting point, and making sure that antivirus, and that they have different names in terms of what they're capable of doing, but certainly you want the capability to be able to detect and stop ransomware attacks, because they're increasing in their impacts to businesses. So other things that we would expect to see is making sure that auto updates are set up on the machine. So a lot of the vulnerabilities that we see coming through are from unpatched systems. So making sure that auto updates are set up, and with that, making sure that your devices are rebooted regularly, because some of those updates require the machine to be restarted. Other things that we would recommend are the use of password managers. So again, being able to we all appreciate that managing passwords is really difficult, and there's always a lure towards using the same password across multiple systems. So this is something that can help reduce that, and there are other ways that you can use browser settings as well to capture and manage some of your passwords. So that's kind of the fundamental things. And then there are other additional things such as VPN, which is a virtual private network if you're connecting back to your office. And there may be levels of encryption as well that you require on your machine, depending on the data that you're storing. But you know, the fundamentals, if we look at some of the attacks that happen, are still remaining around two things. One is emails. Okay, so the most likely route that you're going to be compromised is through email. So having good filtering on your email and email controls is good. And sorry, I've forgotten the second thing. So the first thing was making sure that you've got what was coming in from emails, and then I think the second thing that I was going to say was around your web browser. So there's two things that you've got to have controls around.
Okay, and then just coming across to Vasilios on that point, and obviously you see some of this through your clinic. What are the sort of key things that people should be thinking of in this respect? Is he there? Have we lost him?
I think his internet connection is paused.
All right, we'll wait for Vasilios to come back, and we'll trundle on. So the next thing is quite nice actually, because you just talked about emails and incoming emails, but people are asking now about keeping online personal details about either their employees.
Okay,
safe.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Vasilios. We'll come to
Okay, I think there was a glitch. Yeah.
How can I keep online personal details about my employees safe? And I suppose this is heightened in terms of working from home. I know from my experience that I work for the university, and lots of stuff are managed through sort of HR systems and things and everything else. And when I'm on site, I'm inside the firewall, I'm using that, and I'm now having to do a lot more stuff by email or VPN in to do these sorts of things. So yeah, I'll come to Vasilios first as he's rejoined us. Personal details, people working from home, what are sort of steps we should be taking?
I think it's a very new environment in terms of working from home. Some organizations were already doing it to an extent, but other organizations are not very familiar with this kind of situation. So personal details in terms of employees is a very important aspect. And when we're thinking as a business about the important information we hold, we tend to think about the customers, which are obviously very, very important, and payment details or personal information that we hold for customers. But we don't really think about the employees in the same way. And I think this is very important, because an organization will have very important and very sensitive, perhaps, information about their employees. And in terms of information security, in terms of GDPR, that information is also very important, and it's very crucial to protect that information, because, as you said, a lot of the hacks that happen because employees are either being tricked into clicking on the wrong links, or their credentials might be used, and so on. So it's a very common practice for hackers and cyber criminals to use employee information, either to use it to socially engineer the employees themselves into clicking on a link or making a payment they shouldn't make, and so on, or to convince others that they are these employees, and get them to click on links or download files and make payments that they shouldn't be doing. So apart from GDPR obligations for securing information and avoiding any potential fines from the Information Commissioner, it is also very important to think about the fact that employee data is actually your organization's data. And it's core data for your organization, because using employee information can lead to very significant cyber crimes and hacks that could impact your business in multiple ways.
Okay, thanks, Bas. And probably just more practically, Mo, I'm just thinking about emails. I mean, when I email yourself with a file attached to it and everything else, it's gone from me to you. Is it safe? Is it secure? Is it looping in various different directions? Can I trust it, or do I need to take, because email is probably the biggest way that we transfer information around as businesses. How should we approach that?
Yeah, great point. So a couple of things really. One of the things that organizations can do, which is really simple, is password protecting the files. Okay, so if you're not familiar with it, if you password protect, and you can do it by default within Excel, you can do it within Word, you can do it within PowerPoint. And if you're password protecting these files, it actually encrypts it at the same time. Okay, so when we talk about encryption, that's what we mean by password protecting. So if you need to share a sensitive file with me, password protecting it, sending it to me, and then texting me the password is considered a best practice approach to securing that file, because if somebody intercepts it in between that, they're not going to be able to open the file. Alternatively, if you're doing this regularly, you want to look at different file sharing mechanisms that you can do that securely without obviously having to do that. So again, it depends on the organization. If you're doing one-off documents, that's what you want to do. But actually, if you're doing it regularly, you really want to create a folder or file share with access permissions on there, because from a practical perspective, it doesn't work. But certainly, one of the simplest things that I do is just say password protect the documents. To your point about emails, they are all driven by a driver for us to do something. Okay, it levers on our human innate trust to do something because of it's an authoritative kind of communication or whatever. What we try and encourage people to do is, when you just see those emails, just ignore them, right? Just delete them, because the more comfortable you get with the fact that if an email comes through and you're not sure of it and you just delete it, they'll come back to you and contact you. Because if someone's chasing a PO, right, they're going to keep on you to chase that PO. If they're not and you just delete it, you don't have to feel. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to articulate here is that the very format, and Vaz will probably have a different perspective on this, about what they are trying to drive you to do when you're receiving these emails. And that essentially is the very start of the rest of the actions that you do. So whether you click on the email, open the attachment, and something runs in the background, it's all of these things that then get initiated off the back of that. But actually, if you don't open the email in the first place, it's not effective.
That's an interesting point, and I'll come to you now, Vaz, because it leads nicely into the next question that we've been sent, which is really about understanding of something safe. And I know from my own perspective that I have yesterday received an email from somebody saying, "Oh, are you related to this person? Because they died recently and their inheritance apparently is unclaimed in some part of the world." And it's fairly common, because my name's on the internet, that I get emails pertaining to be from very senior people in the organization, including the person right at the top. Now, I tend to take a careful look at the originating address, and when it's so-and-so 45718@gmail.com, take a bit of it. But how can people recognize these, and what actions should they, or as you rightly point out, Mo, should they not take? So Vaz, your view on that.
Yeah, thank you. I like a government campaign that has the motto "Take 5." And the motto "Take 5" is essentially about thinking before acting, and taking 5 minutes to think about whether that email is legitimate, whether the request in that email is legitimate, what is expected of you to do. Does that fall within your remit, or are they asking you to do something you're not normally requested to do? And I think this is important, and it's even more important during COVID. And I'll explain why. Because we have been thrust into this kind of situation where we all work from home very abruptly. Some people have childcare responsibilities, and that means that they might have their children around and have to deal with the children during working hours as well. They might have to deal with different types of software that they have to use, different processes, different platforms for communicating with people. So it's a whole new environment that requires a lot more attention, perhaps, especially from people that weren't really used to doing that beforehand. And I think the criminals are taking advantage of that situation as well, knowing that people's guard might be down a little bit because they have a lot on their minds, and they have to deal with a lot of new platforms and software and processes. And therefore, taking 5 to think about an email that came through purportedly from your manager or finance people requesting you to do something is really important. My advice when we're talking about emails like that is, if you feel that this is something unusual and it looks problematic or dodgy, just call the person or email the person back, not using obviously the email reply, but a new email stream, and ask them whether it was them. The phone is obviously a much more secure solution because you get directly to the person that you are trying to reach, and they can tell you. The same goes for banks. Yeah, we get a lot of emails and calls from banks actually saying that your account has been compromised. Give us a call, or put in your credentials to verify that this is your account. Otherwise, we will terminate your account in 5 hours, and so on. A lot of people panic, and if they're dealing with a lot of other stuff at the same time, they might not think twice about it, and they might feel, oh, I can't have my bank account terminated. I need to verify it's me and provide that information without taking the 5 minutes to think about it. So I think this is quite important in a way to avoid, as Mo said, these kind of scams.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way of looking at it. Take 5. Is it reasonable? Check with the person. That's a fantastic way of looking at it. Which leads us nicely on to one of the questions that's come through, which is about having customers and customers having faith in your cyber, I suppose, security, and helping those customers to feel that you're looking after their data and that there's some brand trust. And I'll come to Mo to start with from an applied perspective. Obviously you're a consultant, you provide advice and everything else. How would you suggest that businesses project that we're cyber safe, we're cyber ready kind of view?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of ways that this can be approached, but traditionally, you need to have a standard that you've adopted that's recognized within the industry. So the government released Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus a few years ago now, and these are real kite marks and expectations for SMEs to show that they have that they've taken the basic controls and take cybersecurity seriously. There's an additional standard which is just above that, which is recently, which has been going for a while as well, which is IASME Gold, which is a light version of industry ISO 27001 standard, and then you can go all the way up to maturity to ISO 27001. And with all of these, they come from, there's 2 perspectives. One is you're gaining these because you take security seriously and you genuinely, as an organization, want to embed it culturally, right? Because you want to do the right thing, because you're saying the right thing, you're doing the right thing. And there's another perspective that I've seen from organizations that need to do it just to support contracts. So they'll look to certify purely so that they can tick the box, so that they can get on, so they can become a supplier. And the danger that we have with this approach is that the whole purpose of securing the supply chain is gaining assurance as you move through the supply chain that everybody's doing their part. So if you are advocating to do something and you're not, and the risk then sits with your organization at being compromised, and then the attackers moving laterally across to your customer. So the impact to your organization will be significant. And it's one of the things that we continually work with organizations. It's the Achilles heel, working through the supply chain to make sure that everybody's doing what they say that they should be doing. So to answer your question, certainly Cyber Essentials is a great scheme. Highly recommend that. It's not expensive. It's something you can, it's something that's been given a lot of thought by the NCSC and other industry standards. It's been advocated. Highly recommend anybody and everybody to go and Google it and have a look. So that's something I highly recommend.
Okay, and Vaz, from your perspective, and giving that advice out in clinic, and I think you've been involved in some research around SME cybercrime and such. How do you think businesses should show that they got best practice going on?
I think Mo covered the core elements with Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. So we are working with the National Cybersecurity Center, and obviously this would be our advice as well, that this is generated by the NCSC. And then obviously if you need something more advanced like the ISOs or the IASME Gold, definitely this is a pathway to ensuring that you have and more compliance and security. I think apart from the certification, which, as Mo said, might end up being a tick box exercise, it is really important for businesses to maybe have a message apart from the certification in terms of how they are treating data and how they focus on security and what they actually do in order to maintain that certification and the standards of the certification on a regular basis. So that can be communicated as an information security policy from the organization. And I think that provides some extra assurances in terms of, okay, I'm certified, I've done the exercise, I've got my badge, but at the same time, this was not just a one-off for me. This is something I really pay attention to. I take care of my staff and take care of their cyber awareness. Things change. The field is very dynamic. And I think it's really important to demonstrate that this is not a one-off thing, but also something that you need to take care of on a regular basis, and make sure that your employees as well are aware that this is something important and they get the proper training to deal with the challenges.
Okay, thank you for that. It's quite comprehensive. That's a nice way of looking, isn't it? It's saying I've got the accreditation and here's why and how I implement it in the context of why you're dealing with me. Coming on to our final questions now, and I think this is one I'll probably go back to Vaz initially and then come across to Mo. Is cybercrime a criminal offence? I think that's probably quite a broad question. And do the police do anything if it's reported? So you're doing quite a lot of research in this area. Is cybercrime an offence?
Yeah, definitely, it definitely is. Depends on the cybercrime. Obviously, we've got the Computer Misuse Act of 1990, and it has been amended quite significantly in previous years as well. And that deals with hacking and unauthorized access and dealing with hacking tools and attacks on critical infrastructures and all that sort of more cyber-dependent cyber crimes, as we say. And obviously the Fraud Act deals with a lot of activities that would fall under the cyber-enabled aspects, where you have phishing, scams, and so on. So it's definitely in the law in terms of these behaviors being criminalized. The police is doing a lot in terms of dealing with cybercrime, but cybercrime poses some very important challenges to actually dealing with it from a law enforcement perspective. The main thing being extra jurisdictionality, which means someone could be in a totally different country, very far away, and they might be stealing small amounts from loads of businesses using ransomware. How easy would it be to actually locate that person if they're using encryption and masking their tracks? But at the same time, can you extradite that person? Is there an agreement between the two countries to extradite cyber criminals? Some countries facilitate that more than others. and it depends on general relationships as well. But we've seen cases where hackers could not be extradited to the US from the UK, and there were very significant reasons for that. But you're thinking, US, UK, that they collaborate quite significantly, so that might be easier to achieve, but it's not that straightforward. So in that sense, law enforcement can look into it. But obviously, if a cyber criminal is far away, that might be quite challenging. However, there have been arrests and prosecutions and convictions. And I think one of the other main aspects that we don't think about is the victim support, which is really important. And law enforcement is trying to provide that more extensively.
And so coming to you, Mo, from your perspective, I'm just wondering, actually, from a practical, have you had any clients that you've helped who have been the victims of cybercrime and have taken that prosecutorial route?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, and I'll be, I'll be honest and transparent here in my experiences, and that is recording the crime and getting a crime number. So there is a process for recording and registering the incident. But I think my experience is that the police's interest is gathering intelligence to understand more strategically how that operation is being operated, and not necessarily focused on the impact to that small business. Do you know what I mean? So, my perspective on this is, if you're a small business, even larger businesses struggle to get what they think would be a traditional police response to cyber incidents. And again, from my experience, the cyber security, the police cyber units are under-resourced and challenged, and so they have to set filters as to the type of groups and the types of cyber crimes that they can allocate their time to. And unfortunately, again, in my experience, that means that for the audience that we're speaking about today, if you're an SME, you are not going to get a lot of TLC from the, from the cybercrime units, and that's just the reality of where we are. So, so to combat that, there's things that you can do when you go and do things such as we said, cyber essentials. There's opportunities to get an element of cyber insurance that may help remediate some of the impact to you. But prevention is better than cure. So the one thing that I just end up on saying there is, one of the things organizations always do is think, am I a target, right? Or actually, I'm not a target because I don't do this and I don't do that. I don't have this, I'm not going to be attractive. We have a term in the military that we used to use, which was, don't worry about the bullet with your name on it, worry about the bullet marked to whoever. And so that's, again, the reflection that you have as a business owner. You may just coincidentally be part of something that wasn't targeting you, but now you're impacted. So, prevention is better than cure.
Okay, that's really helpful. I mean, that's the end of the questions that we have from SMEs. When we spoke at the beginning, I sort of said we'd come to you for a bit of an example of something around cybercrime, or potentially something in recent times. I'm going to come to Vasilios first. Do you want to give the people watching a bit of an example?
Yeah, so I would like to mention an example that is not particularly COVID related, but it might be very relevant to COVID working situations at the moment. So we are seeing a lot of people being furloughed. There's an expectation that a lot of people might get fired eventually, with the economic situation unfolding in the coming months. And one of the issues that we keep talking about through the clinic when we're talking to different organizations is whether organizations actually think about the information that people leaving the organization might have, and what the impact of that could be. So we are helping a lot of charities, and charities have volunteers, and we're helping a lot of small organizations, and there is quite a lot of change in personnel, let's say, in organizations like that sometimes. So one of the main questions we are asking is, do you ever think about the information that these people were holding whilst they were part of the organization, and what happens to that information when they actually go. Do they bring back any devices that you might have given them? Do you change the passwords? So I was discussing this topic at a conference, and I said usually we don't really have exit interviews, as we call them, about information. We have exit interviews in relation to salaries and all that, but we don't really focus that much on information. And I was approached by an individual that was working for a big corporation, and he said, "Well, we have two processes. One is money related and the other is information related. And most managers actually activate the money related process for leavers, but not the information related process." So we are talking about an organization with thousands upon thousands of employees. And you would assume they would have a great security. But if that happens in organizations of that size and organizing, and people just go away with devices with loads of personal information, passwords, access codes, and all that, you can imagine how easy it is for organizations of a smaller size, or even for charities to have people that go away, taking with them a lot of information, and a lot of resources, and even access codes and passwords that are never changed. So if they get hacked, then that can have an impact on the organization, even though that person is not an employee anymore. So I think this is something I wanted to highlight. And obviously, this will become very important when we're talking about the COVID era, and how we have change in personnel in the coming months.
Okay, thanks very much, Vas. And then coming to you, Mo, an anecdote, story, or example you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, I just want to share a real example over COVID, and this is one of our best friend is runs a hairdressers, and I just wanted to share kind of the transition that they found when, like many hairdressers now that are looking to reopen. So aside from the practical bits of the protection that you have to apply, what they've actually found when you're looking at a business and you're looking at the website that they have and the website bookings that now everybody has to book through, and the fact that as part of I think there's government requirements now for being able to have the contact details or telephone numbers in terms of impact and tracing and everything like that. So now you're storing the customer's data, which wasn't something that you did before, and then talking through all the issues that there are with trying to get contact details from people that actually, some of them don't want to give it to you, but some of them are, and that you are managing that data, and then you're doing things like, so now essentially everything that operates for your business is now in a database somewhere, right? And how are you managing that, and how are you protecting that, and what's the impact to your business if the website isn't available? Because if the website isn't available now, you can't get bookings. If you can't get bookings, you're not going to. And then it's what happens if the data that the people have recorded there gets compromised, and do you have a process for suddenly making them aware that their data is being exposed? So I suppose it's just talking about how these little steps can suddenly sort of, when you stop and think about it, suddenly, oh, okay, I've got a whole load of controls now that I've got to do, which I didn't do before. And again, for small businesses, I think that's what I've seen in my experience, that they will sleepwalk is not the right term, but the business will evolve, and as the business evolves, there isn't the thought about what data am I now managing and how am I controlling that data. And so that was something that I just thought was pertinent, and I hope that's useful. And the last thing that I just wanted to end on as well is something that I always get frustrated with, is this perception that doing cybersecurity is expensive. Okay, I don't think it is. I think for the points that we started off on is understanding the risks to your organization and where your data is, and then going to the NCSE website. There's lots of great free material there, and you can start to understand and then make an informed decision around whether you need additional consultancy and support, or actually whether you've got enough information and you can make your own informed decisions. So certainly there's enough freely available information out there. That means that you should be informed enough to be able to take some really good diligent steps. So don't think that it's not a cost, it shouldn't be a cost barrier to stopping you reviewing what you need to do.
Okay, thanks, Mo. And yeah, just reflecting back on today's webinar, I'm just looking at my notes. Cybercrime, any private that involves a computer. Yep, what should we be doing? Looking at the data you hold, looking at the risk of that data. What do you really care about was a phrase that really came to me. I particularly liked the short, sharp. Have you got your antivirus software? Have you got your updates? Are they automatic? Do you know where your devices are going? Are you using password managers? And if you're linking back to the office, are you there with VPNs? You know, are you thinking about both the personal details of your customers as well as your employees and the importance there? Thinking about email, simple thing of like password protecting it and texting the password ahead. The huge campaign, which I've not even heard of actually, Vasilios, but Take 5 is a fantastic phrase, isn't it? I've got an email in front of me. I'm not happy about it. I'm going to take 5 to think about it. And if I'm still not happy about it, perhaps even ring the person and say, "Did you send this to me, or is it?" And the advice actually to, if that is the case, delete it. Don't open it. Don't click on links. Don't do those sorts of things. And I think, yeah, thanks to Mo, because that great bit at the end is yeah, you've got a whole hospitality industry, not just hairdressers, but restaurateurs, cafe owners. You want to step inside the premises and sit down at a table, they're required to record that data. How long should I be keeping it for? Where am I keeping it? Is it secure? And I think probably finishing on that NCSC website with all of its tools and advice for people to go and visit. So when we put this up online on the university website, we'll make sure we include a link to that. Huge thank you then to Mo Adoud from MA Consulting, and also an amazing thank you to Dr. Vasilios Karangianopoulos from the Institute of Criminal Justice Studies. Thank you both very much for your time today. We've really appreciated it, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.